I would really like to have a futurarchy market for Allo. I would love to know where the TVF, total value flowed, through the Allo ecosystem is coming from. Is it conviction voting? Is it commitment pooling? Is it quadratic funding? Okay, this month, the most TVF is coming from mechanism X, but 3 months ago, it was coming from mechanism Y. That data is really important to me as an ecosystem builder.
It's Futarchy. Futarchy is basically decision markets applied to policy. And actually, in the original paper that Robin wrote a very long time ago, he really speaks about policy as it relates to the government. So it's really just Futarchy is decision markets as it relates to making policy decisions at the highest level. We're kind of taking that and we're just kind of abstracting away the government and just saying governance. And then that's really what we call Futarchy.
Amazing. Walkie, what do you got? Let's grill him. Just grill him on everything. Let's talk legal. Let's talk all the legal hurdles. It's everyone's
You thought
favorite.
Do it.
You thought we were going to thought lead about on-chain capital allocation, but this is actually a final exam.
This is what I expected. That's what I told the team.
Welcome to the Allo.Capital podcast. If you're just joining us, we are doing seasons, and this season we are summoning Allo Capital, a new spin out from Gitcoin that's designed to build the capital allocation layer of the tokenized internet. We think there's big upside here. Capital allocation is a multi-trillion-dollar design space. VCs, governments, NGOs, and DAOs all have to allocate capital, but it's also a place where you can start small. Every time you spend money, you are allocating capital. We are threading a through line, partnering with builders, researchers, and funders to figure out what on-chain capital allocation looks like, building and testing and dog fooding it on-chain. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website at allo.capital, where you can download the Allo books for free, play with some of our dApps, join the Telegram, or participate in the DAO. All right, my guest today is Vaughn Mackenzie Landell. He is CEO and co-founder of Butter. Vaughn wants society to make better decisions. He believes that our hardest problems are rooted within our institutions, and that blockchains, by accelerating the feedback loop on institutional design, are the solutions. Butter addresses government alignment challenges through mechanism design. They implement treasury governance mechanisms, leveraging prediction markets, and building upon the principles of futurarchy. So that's what we're talking about on this episode. We're talking about futurarchy and conditional funding markets. In what ways can we apply info finance and prediction markets to allocate capital better on chain and solve Ethereum's biggest problems in the contemporary landscape? So we talk about Futarchy. We talk about his pilot with the Optimism ecosystem. We talk about an upcoming pilot that I am trying to stimulate with GG24, Gitcoin's 24th quarterly matching campaign. And then we just sort of play jazz on-chain capital allocation, Futarchy, info finance. And I think this is a big brain episode, but it's also very approachable once you understand the core primitive of a prediction market. So a fun episode for traversing the design space of on-chain capital allocation, and I think you are going to enjoy it. Hi, Vaughn. How are you?
Really good. Thanks, Kevin. How are you?
Excited for the conversation. Also, hi, Rena, my co-host and co-founder.
Hi, Walkie.
We're here today to talk about Butter, futurarchy, and conditional funding markets. Why don't you splunk us into the deep end, Vaughn? What are conditional funding markets?
Absolutely. So let's say we start with a prediction market. Most people have a good model of those. We're going to look at an event that's about to happen in the future, and we're going to try and predict the probability that that event comes to pass. And then at the end, we resolve the markets when the event happens. Polymarket's been doing this now for a while. I think they've traded about $12 billion just on predicting future events. And there's a really great June dashboard up there, which basically says that Polymarket about 1 month out is about 91% accurate. And this is an incredible statistic. And the idea with conditional funding markets is just simply saying, what if we took this prediction or this predictive power and we used it to predict which of our investments are going to produce the most growth, for example? And you can kind of take this idea and you can kind of standardize it and say, well, what if we just had a protocol for trying to predict the result of capital allocation decisions, and then actually using the results, the predictions themselves, to actually allocate the capital. But that's what conditional funding markets are, is kind of in the title itself. And so that's what we've been working on. And we most recently launched one with Optimism last month.
So it sounds like futurarchy is sort of like prediction markets, but for public goods funding, or prediction markets for ecosystem growth. Is that too reductionist?
Not necessarily. I think the place to start is to think you have one huge circle, and that's like markets, right? And then one small version of that, one small part of that circle is prediction markets. These are predictions about things that are going to happen in the future. And then a subset of that is futile, or actually, the subset of that is decision markets. So these are prediction markets that you're going to use the results of those markets to make a decision. So the classic example is hiring or firing market. So should we fire the CEO? You run a market based on the change in price if you hire or fire the CEO. Sorry, if you do not fire the CEO. And then once you're done, you use the price to actually decide whether to hire or fire the CEO. And a subset of those decision markets is what we call Futarchy, or as Robin Hanson, the inventor, calls Futarchy. Futarchy is basically decision markets applied to policy. And actually, in the original paper that Robin wrote very long time ago, like in the year 2000, he really speaks about policy as it relates to the government. So it's really just Futarchy is decision markets as it relates to making policy decisions at the highest level. We're kind of taking that and we're just kind of abstracting away the government and just saying governance, and then that's really what we call Futarchy. So where we are with conditional funding markets, which is decision markets for capital allocation decisions, we're really being particular and taking a nice slice of that. So we're even smaller in a really small wedge of that entire pie. And that's where we are when we talk about conditional funding markets, just a subset of Futarchy.
Could you take us deep on the experiment that you did with Optimism so that we have a tangible example of this? And then, Karina, next question will go to you.
100%. 100%. So a really good way of thinking about this is just thinking about any typical grants program. So you could take Gitcoin grants, or you could take an L2 or a DeFi protocol. They have some capital and they want to distribute it to their ecosystem. And in this example, we have Optimism. Optimism obviously are building out the super chain. And one of the things they're really interested in is how they coordinate resources across all of those chains. And so this really was a kind of an experiment to see if they could coordinate capital allocation across a whole bunch of chains. So they took an amount of OP. In this example, it was 500k OP, and they were trying to actually it was a million OP, but split in two. And they took 500k OP and they distributed it using a conditional funding market. And they asked the participants, forecasters who turned up, to estimate the impact on Superchain TVL for any of the participants. There were 22. If they each received 100 KOP, so just a fifth of the 500 KOP, and then we ran that few target experiment for about a week, and we used the results. So as forecasters were using the Futarchy, they were changing the forecast TVL, right? So we were basically saying, do we think the TVL is too low or too high? And then buying or selling the tokens in the market, the up token and the down token, to adapt the market price. And then at the end, we used the actual final TVL estimate to allocate the capital. Now, alongside that, there was also the Standard Grants Council running. And that's where the other 500 KOP went. So we actually also have this comparison now between two different mechanisms, which is going to be great when we kind of reach the 3-month mark and we see what the actual results are. But yeah, that was the idea. So a simple objective, we're trying to increase TVL across the superchain. We're going to use a conditional funding market or a Futarchy to predict the result of making these allocations, and then use that prediction to actually distribute the capital itself. And now we wait.
Bated breath. Very excited for that. Thanks, Vaughn. You've talked a little bit about the mechanism itself and then, of course, what you're doing in the experiments. But you and I have chatted a bit offline about this. Why is this such a powerful mechanism? Why is it so important? Um, to me, it's important, but why do you think it is, especially in our current ecosystem?
Yeah, this is really a great question, because I think that it depends really where your focus is. Now, the reason why I think we like to use markets in general is because markets are probably one of the best, or at least one of the most well tested mechanisms, mostly because we have lots of them, right? So we see them all the time. There's lots of history and literature on how markets perform, but they're really decentralized, right? Like anyone can spin up a market to sell or buy something, and most people understand how they work. And this is in comparison to other mechanisms we may use, which can be harder for people to understand. Obviously, we have quadratic voting and funding in Gitcoin, and people have to try and acclimatize to that. It takes some onboarding, but most people have an intrinsic understanding of market. So this is one of the great uses. It's decentralized, but also very easy for people to understand, like a well adopted technology. And if because it's decentralized, it's actually just very hard to bias. One of the problems we have in our ecosystem is that sometimes when we implement decision technologies where we have a large group of people who come together to try and make a decision, it's really difficult to guarantee that decisions can't be biased by some private interest, special interest, some minority, sometimes a majority, or even just the big whale who just has a significant amount of tokens, for example. We want mechanisms that aren't not just that they're not biased, but they don't become easier to bias as they scale. And that's the other problem. So the other problem is sometimes these mechanisms work well when they're small, but as they scale, they become harder to reason about and harder to prove that they do the thing you want. And so this is the other benefit of markets. Markets work fairly well at scale, right? And so the other thing about Futarchy is that it can scale well to tackle some of the problems we have in crypto. We have a significantly large amount of capital. We have a ton of people. Basically, anyone on the internet can turn up and opine and give their input. And so maybe we prefer that they give us an input on the price of an asset rather than asking them their preference on an outcome. And then the other one is that they tend to, at least in history, we've seen the prediction markets tend to be more accurate over time. And this is when you compare them. Specifically, there is a paper on election results, and they tend to be more accurate and have been more accurate. I think it was 74% more accurate than polls and so on. And this was tracked over a number of years, actually decades, on the Iowa electronic markets, where you can, in the US as well, go in and bet on elections. So that's really why we like them. That's why we think that they're a really useful technology. Actually, an incredible opportunity for our ecosystem.
Amazing. Walkie, what do you got? Let's grill him. Just grill him on everything. Let's talk legal. Let's talk
Yeah.
all the legal hurdles. It's everyone's
You thought
Let's
favorite.
that
do it.
you thought we were gonna thought lead about on-chain capital allocation, but this is actually a final exam. Um,
I,
uh,
this is what I expected. That's what I told the team.
so I want to draw a line between the work that you're doing and the vision for Allo Capital, which is that, the internet changed how we move information across society. Blockchains are going to change how we move value across society. The internet brought us packets of information. Now we have packets of value, scarcity that can be moved around. Ergo, we're going to completely reinvent how capital is allocated as more and more assets get tokenized. And we now have programmable blockchains, and we can do better on-chain capital allocation. That's sort of like the thesis for Allo Capital. And what Rena and I and the Illuminati are trying to do is to build a network where builders who are building within this design space get accelerated with technology and distribution and just connected to other builders. We're still figuring out the exact offering there, but I'm wondering if you draw a through line between CFMs, conditional funding markets, the broader design space of info finance, and then like the most broad aperture, I think, is on-chain capital allocation and where the space is going. You know, if you could kind of like play jazz on top of that thesis a little bit, I'd love to know where you think info finance is going or where you think CFMs are going in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I've got. I mean, I've got a couple of things to say on info finance, but I think we could start with Allo and I guess where I think the opportunity lies for Allo. I think one of the interesting things that we've got to watch as an ecosystem is watch the development of Gitcoin and Gitcoin iterating over time on its kind of role. And I think at the very beginning when Gitcoin launched, there was this like incredible moment when we all felt like we kind of unlocked something. This is incredible. We can actually fund things at scale. People were piling in, people were opining, people were giving their opinions. And then we started to watch it kind of fray. Like it suddenly felt like it wasn't clear what to do with something, and you see like like when a dog picks up something and it's so excited, it's like, but it doesn't really know what to do with it. It's like, I don't know what this is, but I'm excited. And I feel like that's where we got to as an ecosystem. We felt like we had unlocked something, and I think that's the thread that we're now pulling on. I think we're saying, well, look, we have this incredible technology. We actually have this thing we're working on, and the title is "Speculate to Allocate." And I think it's that we have something in crypto that works really well, and we're still all trying to figure out how to harness it. And one of the things we know we can do well is we can allocate capital, we can allocate resources. And it's a long held belief of mine that really governance in general is actually mostly about distributive policies. It's mostly about allocation. It's not really about much else. Like you make one decision. Like we all get together and make one decision. The result of the decision is normally that some group is getting more and some group is getting less. This is a distributive policy. It's a allocation decision that we're making ultimately. And actually, if you just look through most DAOs on like Tally or Agora, and you look at most of the decisions they make, most of them are transfers, right? They mostly move capital. So this is kind of my core thesis, and this is why I think I'm really excited about Allo and Allo's thesis, because I think the main goal here is to try and take a leap forward from the kind of early energy of Gitcoin and figure out, okay, how can we apply this? And I guess like for me, it feels like a more direct, repeatable way. So that's my thinking on Allo. If I kind of zoom out and I think about info finance, I think there's something about crypto that
If you're enjoying this episode, please check out the remainder of the episode on the feed hosted at allo.capital. You must be a allo.capital patron NFT holder to hear the rest of the episode. Allo.capital patron NFTs give you access to the Alluminati, which is a private community that has access to the Allo DAO's evolution, novel capital allocation, intelligence, and research like this episode, like this podcast, and also research reports that we are publishing at allo.capital, and early access to builds and other innovations in the Allo community. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear the rest of the episode, check it out at allo.capital. Peace and love.